My name's Rita, 32 years old, working for one of the biggest companies in town. I joined the company 5 years ago as a junior analyst. My dedication caught the eye of the big boss, Mr. Thompson. He started giving me more responsibilities, and before I knew it, I was handling some pretty important stuff. Then there was his son, Jack. He was my direct supervisor, and let me tell you, he was something else. Smart as a whip when he wanted to be, but more interested in partying than paperwork. "Rita, can you cover for me in the meeting today?" Jack asked, poking his head into my cubicle one morning. The smell of last night's booze was still on his breath. So there I was, sitting in on another director's meeting, spouting off numbers and projections that should have been coming from Jack's mouth. Mr. Thompson seemed pleased, nodding along as I presented our department's progress. As I headed back to my desk, I overheard raised voices coming from Mr. Thompson's office. Curiosity got the better of me, and I lingered near the door, pretending to organize some files. "This is the third meeting you've missed this month, Jack." Mr. Thompson's voice boomed. "What the hell is going on with you?" "Dad, come on, I had it covered." "Rita." "Rita isn't the head of the department, you are. Or at least you're supposed to be. You're out every night, coming in late, if at all. It's time to grow up." There was a long pause, and then Mr. Thompson's voice dropped to a dangerous low. "If you don't get your act together, I swear I'll cut you off. No more cushy job, no more trust fund. You'll be out on your ass faster than you can say, 'Daddy's boy.'" I heard Jack splutter, trying to form a response. "And another thing," Mr. Thompson continued, "it's high time you settled down. Find yourself a decent girl, not those party girls you're always running around with. Start a family, for Christ's sake." 2 months crawled by, and things at the office seemed to settle into an uneasy routine. Jack showed up to meetings more often, though he still looked like death warmed over most mornings. I kept my head down and did my work, trying not to think too much about that overheard conversation. Then, out of nowhere, everything changed. "Hey, Rita," Jack said, leaning against my desk one Friday afternoon. "Got any plans this weekend? How about dinner? Saturday night?" I blinked, sure I'd misheard. "Dinner? With you?" "Yeah, why not? We've worked together for years, but we've never really hung out outside the office." Warning bells were going off in my head. This was my boss, the same guy who'd been a thorn in my side for years. But another part of me was curious. Saturday night rolled around, and to my surprise, Jack was a perfect gentleman. He took me to a nice restaurant, made interesting conversation, and didn't once mention work. It was nice. Over the next few weeks, Jack kept finding excuses to spend time with me. Coffee breaks turned into lunch dates. He'd pop by my desk just to chat. It was flattering, sure, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "I don't get it," I confided in my best friend and Jack's secretary, Sarah, over drinks one night. "Why the sudden interest?" Sarah shrugged. "Maybe he's finally noticed what's been right in front of him all along. You're a catch, Rita." As the weeks turned into months, I found myself warming up to Jack. He was funny, smart when he applied himself, and undeniably attractive. Maybe people really could change. Then came the night that changed everything. We were at a fancy restaurant, celebrating a successful quarter. Jack took a deep breath. "Rita, I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. About my life, my future, about us." My heart started racing. Was this going where I thought it was going? "I know I haven't always been the best boss or the most responsible person," he continued. "But being with you these past few months has made me want to be better. You make me want to be better." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught in my throat. "Rita," he said, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring, "will you marry me?" The world seemed to stop. This was crazy, right? We'd only been dating for a few months. But then again, we'd known each other for years. And I was 32, not getting any younger. Maybe this was my chance at the family I'd always wanted. Yes, I heard myself say, almost in a daze. Yes, I'll marry you. Jack's face lit up, and he slipped the ring onto my finger. As he leaned in to kiss me, I pushed away the nagging doubt in the back of my mind. This was a good thing, right? Jack was changing, becoming the man I always knew he could be. The news of our engagement spread through the office like wildfire. I couldn't help but notice the mixed reactions, some genuine congratulations, others barely concealed skepticism. But the person whose opinion mattered most was Mr. Thompson, Jack's father and our boss. We decided to tell him together, walking into his office hand in hand one morning. "Dad," Jack started, his voice steadier than I'd ever heard it. "Rita and I have some news." Mr. Thompson looked up from his desk, his eyebrows raised. "Oh?" I held out my left hand, the diamond catching the light. "We're engaged." The change in Mr. Thompson's demeanor was immediate and startling. His face broke into a wide grin, and he stood up, coming around his desk to embrace us both. "This is wonderful news," he exclaimed, patting Jack on the back. "I always knew you'd come to your senses eventually, son. And Rita," he turned to me, his eyes twinkling, "I couldn't think of a better addition to our family. You're exactly what this company, and my son, needs." I felt a blush creep up my cheeks. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." "Please, call me Dad," he insisted. "We're family now." The wedding planning was a whirlwind. We decided on a modest ceremony, despite Mr. Thompson's offers for something more extravagant. "It's your day," he'd said, handing us a check with more zeros than I'd ever seen. "Make it special." The day itself passed in a blur of white lace, flowery vows, and champagne toasts. Before I knew it, I was Mrs. Rita Thompson. Our first surprise came when Mr. Thompson presented us with keys to a spacious apartment in the city center. "A wedding gift," he explained. "Every newlywed couple needs their own space." The second surprise came at work. Jack's salary was significantly increased, and suddenly, we were living a life I'd only dreamed of. But old habits die hard. I was still working long hours, often covering for Jack when he'd slip back into his old ways. The difference now was that I was trying to balance it with keeping our new home in order. One night, I came home late, exhausted from a day of back-to-back meetings. The apartment was a mess, and I hadn't had time to grocery shop, let alone cook dinner. Jack was waiting, his face dark with annoyance. "Where have you been? And what's for dinner?" "Rita, I'm used to coming home to a clean house and a hot meal." "Is that too much to ask?" I felt a flare of anger. "I've been working all day too, Jack. I'm doing the best I can. Maybe we should hire a housekeeper?" But Jack's reaction caught me off guard. "A housekeeper? No, that's not the answer. Maybe you should consider quitting your job." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't the Jack I thought I'd married. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw a determination that scared me. The argument about my job didn't end that night. Over the next few weeks, Jack became increasingly insistent that I should quit. I tried to reason with him, but he wouldn't budge. "Jack, your father values my work. He trusts me," I argued one evening. Jack's face hardened. "This isn't about my father. It's about us, our family. Don't you want that?" I felt torn. Of course I wanted a family, but I'd worked so hard for my career. "Can't we have both?" I asked weakly. But Jack was adamant. "Rita, I need you here. Our home needs you here." In the end, despite my reservations and Mr. Thompson's clear disappointment, I resigned from my position. The day I cleared out my desk felt like the end of an era. At first, being at home all day was strange. I felt restless, unsure of what to do with myself. But determined to make the best of it, I threw myself into new pursuits. I enrolled in cooking classes, thinking I could at least improve my culinary skills. On a whim, I also signed up for dance lessons. It was something I'd always wanted to try, but never had the time for. To my surprise, I loved it. Between the cooking classes, dance lessons, and keeping the house in order, my days began to fill up. I even started to enjoy this new lifestyle. It was different, sure, but not terrible. Jack, on the other hand, seemed to be working more than ever. He'd come home late, often exhausted and irritable. "How was your day?" I'd ask, setting dinner on the table. "Busy," he'd grunt, barely looking up from his plate. "Dad's really piling on the work lately. Says I need to prove myself." I felt a twinge of guilt. Was he working harder to make up for my lost income? "Maybe I should talk to your father," I suggested. "Ask him to ease up a bit." Jack's head snapped up, his eyes flashing. "No, I can handle it. I don't need you fighting my battles." As the months passed, I settled into a routine. Mornings were for housework, afternoons for classes or errands. I'd have dinner ready when Jack got home, hoping each day that he'd be in a better mood. But the Jack I knew seemed to be slipping away. He was distant, often distracted. Our conversations, when we had them, were superficial at best. One night, as we got ready for bed, I decided to broach the subject. "Jack, is everything okay? You seem different lately." He paused, toothbrush halfway to his mouth. "Different how?" I shrugged, trying to keep my tone light. "Just distant, I guess. We hardly talk anymore." He spit into the sink, his movements sharp. "I'm working hard, Rita. For us. For our future. Isn't that what you wanted?" "Of course, but..." "Then what's the problem?" He cut me off. "This is what being an adult is about. Responsibility. Sacrifice." I nodded, not wanting to argue. But as I lay in bed that night, listening to Jack's steady breathing beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. A year into our marriage, I thought I had settled into my new role as a housewife. But one evening, Jack came home with an unusual request. "Rita, I need you to write down all your monthly expenses," he said, his tone businesslike. Surprised but compliant, I sat down and made a list. Groceries, cleaning supplies, my cooking classes, dance lessons, beauty treatments, clothes. I handed it to him, watching as his eyes scanned the paper. What happened next felt like a punch to the gut. Jack took a pen and started crossing items off the list. My cooking classes, gone. Dance school, eliminated. Beauty salon, hairdresser, manicures, all struck through with angry red lines. Even my clothing budget was slashed. He looked up, his eyes cold. "From now on, I'll only give you money for groceries and cleaning supplies. I'll handle the bills myself." I stared at him, disbelief washing over me. "But that leaves me with nothing for myself. No personal money at all." His face hardened. "You married me for money, didn't you? Well, guess what? You're incapable of earning your own money now. You're completely dependent on me, and it's time you learn to be obedient and do as you're told." From that day on, our relationship changed dramatically. Jack barely spoke to me when he came home. He'd grunt a greeting, eat the dinner I prepared in silence, and then retreat to his study or go to bed early. Without money of my own, I couldn't go anywhere or do anything. My world had shrunk to the four walls of our home. Thoughts of divorce began to creep into my mind. But just as I was seriously considering leaving, everything changed again. One morning, as I was making breakfast, a wave of nausea hit me. At first, I thought it was just a stomach bug. But as the days passed and the nausea persisted, a different possibility occurred to me. With shaking hands, I took a pregnancy test. Positive. I was pregnant. That evening, I waited nervously for Jack to come home. When he walked through the door, I took a deep breath and blurted out, "Jack, I'm pregnant." His reaction was not what I expected. His face contorted with anger, and he yelled, "I don't need children. Get rid of it." In that moment, something inside me snapped. This was my child, growing inside me. I wanted this baby, even if Jack didn't. No, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I'm keeping this baby. Jack's face turned an alarming shade of red. For a moment, I thought he might hit me. Instead, he stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind him. As I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face, I realized I had a decision to make. This wasn't just about me anymore. I had a child to think about now. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I couldn't raise a child in this toxic environment. I needed help, and there was only one person I could think of who might be able to provide it. With shaking hands, I dialed my father-in-law's number. The phone rang twice before Mr. Thompson's familiar voice answered. "Rita? Is everything all right?" he asked, concern evident in his tone. I took a deep breath. "Dad, I'm pregnant." There was a moment of silence, then an explosion of joy. "Rita, that's wonderful news. I'm going to be a grandfather." His enthusiasm was infectious, and for the first time since discovering my pregnancy, I felt a glimmer of hope. "Can you come over?" I asked, my voice small. "I need to talk to you." "Of course, I'll be right there," he said without hesitation. True to his word, Mr. Thompson arrived at our apartment within the hour. His face lit up when he saw me, but his smile faltered as he took in my tear-stained face and trembling hands. I told him everything: Jack's reaction, his demand that I get an abortion, the financial control, the emotional abuse. Mr. Thompson listened, his face growing darker with each revelation. "I'll talk to him," he said firmly. "This ends now." That evening, I heard raised voices from the study. I couldn't make out the words, but Mr. Thompson's tone was angrier than I'd ever heard it. When they emerged, Jack looked chastened, while his father's face was set in grim determination. To my surprise, Jack's behavior changed after that night. He became warmer, more attentive. "I'm sorry," he said one evening. "I was scared, but I've changed my mind. I'm looking forward to meeting our child." As the weeks passed, severe morning sickness hit me hard. I could barely leave the bed without feeling nauseous. Jack seemed annoyed by my condition, though he tried to hide it. He started coming home less frequently, citing work commitments. Then, one day, he surprised me by coming home early. "I brought you something," he said, holding out a box of tea. "It's special tea for pregnant women. It should help with the morning sickness. I have to go on a long business trip, but I want to make sure you're taken care of." I nodded, grateful for his apparent concern. As soon as he left, I brewed a cup of the tea. It had a strange taste, but I ignored it, hoping for relief. The first day, I did feel better. The nausea seemed less intense, and I was able to keep food down. But a couple of days later, I noticed blood on my underwear. Panic seized me, and I rushed to the doctor. After examining me, the doctor asked about any medications I was taking. I mentioned the tea and handed him the package. As he read the ingredients, his face drained of color. "Mrs. Thompson, you must stop drinking this tea immediately," he said, his voice shaking. "It contains a substance that can cause severe bleeding. If you had continued, you could have lost the baby, or your own life." The doctor insisted on calling the police, but I had other plans. I needed to talk to Mr. Thompson first. He had to know what his son had done. I arrived at the office building, my heart pounding. The receptionist informed me that Mr. Thompson was in a meeting with important partners. Frustrated but determined, I decided to wait. As I paced the lobby, a familiar face caught my eye. It was Sarah, Jack's secretary, and my friend from my working days. "Rita, what are you doing here?" Sarah asked, surprise evident in her voice. "I need to speak with Mr. Thompson," I replied, then hesitated before adding, "Say, do you know which business trip Jack is on?" Sarah's face contorted in confusion. "Business trip? Rita, Jack's not on a business trip. He's officially on vacation, to take care of you." Sarah must have seen the realization dawning on my face, because she quickly ushered me into a nearby empty office. "Rita, there's something else," she said, her voice low. Another employee took vacation at the same time as Jack. His new assistant, Amanda. My suspicions crystallized into certainty. Do you have her address? Sarah hesitated, then nodded. She scribbled on a piece of paper and handed it to me. As I reached for it, she grabbed my hand. There's more, she said, her eyes filled with guilt. Jack, he's been having affairs with multiple employees. They even use his office sometimes. I felt the blood drain from my face. Sarah quickly pulled out her phone, tapping furiously. Moments later, my phone buzzed with incoming messages. I found these on his computer, Sarah explained, her voice barely audible. I wanted to tell you, but I was scared and I didn't want to hurt you. With trembling hands, I opened the messages. Photo after photo appeared, each one a dagger to my heart. Jack, in various states of undress, with different women. In his office, in hotel rooms, at parties. The evidence of his betrayal was overwhelming. I don't remember leaving the office or driving to the address Sarah had given me. The next thing I knew, I was parked across the street from a nondescript apartment building. I didn't have to wait long. A familiar car pulled up, and out stepped Jack, laughing and joking with a young woman I recognized as his assistant. They walked into the building, arms around each other, completely oblivious to my presence. With numb fingers, I pulled out my phone and dialed Mr. Thompson's number. Dad, I said when he answered, my voice surprisingly steady. I need you to come to this address immediately. There's something you need to see. 2 hours felt like an eternity as I waited in the car. Finally, Mr. Thompson's sleek black sedan pulled up. He got out, his face etched with concern. Together, we entered the building and climbed the stairs to the apartment. As we approached, I could hear muffled sounds from inside. The door was slightly ajar. With a glance at Mr. Thompson, I pushed it open. The scene that greeted us was exactly what I had feared. Jack and his assistant, Amanda, were entangled on the couch, clearly in the midst of an intimate moment. They froze at our entrance, faces pale with shock. Mr. Thompson's voice cut through the silence like ice. Jack, explain yourself. Now. Jack scrambled to his feet, hastily pulling on his clothes. Dad, it's not what it looks like. Really? I interjected, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Because it looks exactly like what it is. Jack's face contorted with anger. This is your fault, Rita. If you weren't so unattractive, always sick, never taking care of yourself. I laughed bitterly. How was I supposed to take care of myself when you cut off all my money? Mr. Thompson turned to me, confusion evident on his face. What do you mean? I've been paying you a substantial allowance. I've been transferring the money directly to your joint account every month. Jack's shoulders slumped in defeat. I took the money for myself, he admitted quietly. Amanda, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke up. You can't blame Jack for everything. Rita trapped him with this pregnancy. She's trying to force him into fatherhood when he clearly doesn't want it. I felt a chill run down my spine. Is that why you tried to get rid of me? Is that why you gave me that tea to cause a miscarriage? Mr. Thompson whirled to face me, shock evident on his face. What tea? Rita, what are you talking about? Through tears, I recounted the story of the special tea Jack had given me, and what the doctor had told me about its dangerous effects. As I spoke, I watched Mr. Thompson's face harden into a mask of fury. Amanda, seeing his reaction, began to backpedal frantically. It wasn't my idea. Jack came up with it. Please, don't call the police. Don't fire me. I'll do anything. Jack rounded on her, his face twisted with rage. How dare you? I loved you, and this is how you repay me? By betraying me? I couldn't help it, I burst out laughing. The absurdity of the situation, the sheer audacity of Jack's claim of love, it was all too much. Still chuckling, I pulled out my phone and showed Amanda the photo Sarah had sent me. Some love, I said, my voice hard. Tell me, Amanda, Do you recognize any of these other women? Jack's been busy, hasn't he? Amanda's face contorted with fury. She lunged at Jack, scratching and hitting him. You bastard, she screamed. You told me I was special. Jack pushed her away, yelling back, it was your idea. You wanted to get rid of Rita. You came up with the tea plan. I'd had enough. Stop it, both of you, I shouted. The police can sort out who's to blame. Jack turned to his father, his eyes pleading. Dad, please. We can handle this privately. No need for a scandal. I shook my head. It's too late for that. My doctor already contacted the police when he discovered what was in that tea. Mr. Thompson's voice was cold as he addressed his son. I'm done covering for you, Jack. You've gone too far this time. Let the law decide your fate. The following months were a whirlwind of change. Mr. Thompson took swift action. Jack was immediately fired from the company and disinherited. The apartment, once a symbol of my gilded cage, was transferred into my name. The divorce proceedings were mercifully quick, given the circumstances. Jack and Amanda faced serious charges, attempted murder of both me and my unborn child. Their trial was a media sensation, but I focused on my health and the baby growing inside me. Months later, I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. When my maternity leave ended, Mr. Thompson surprised me with an offer I couldn't refuse, the position of department head, the very role Jack had once held. As I settled into my new office, my son cooing softly in the bassinet beside my desk, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road had been hard, filled with betrayal and pain, but I'd come out stronger.